Mark, are you the most popular man in Plymouth right now?
Maybe in this room. I don't know about Plymouth, but it's a nice thought.
Yeah.
It's a nice thought.
Everyone I mention, whenever I mention your name, the response is generally one of eulogy, basically.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
That's nice to hear. Obviously being born and bred here, you know, and choosing to stay here, although I could, you know, jet off anywhere and live anywhere. I just love coming back to this place, so that's nice to hear.
Why everything you've been through, places you've been, the travelling you've now done, the life you've lived, why still here in Plymouth?
I don't know, it's just home, isn't it? Everyone's got that home, that place they like coming back to, where they feel comfortable and relaxed, and you know, for me that's Plymouth. I was born here. I was fortunate enough when I joined the military to be based here for 80% of my career. I met my wife here. She moved down from Surrey and stayed here. All my children go to school here. All my friends and family are down here. And I do, you know, I travel the world and I see some great cities and some much, you know, this is a small city, Plymouth, and I've been to some much bigger ones, but, you know, as exciting as they are to visit, it doesn't feel as good as just coming back home all the time, you know. I just love living in Plymouth.
What's some of your fondest memories of your childhood here?
Probably the naughtiest ones, if I'm honest. Just the childhood ones, you know, growing up and getting in trouble and just discovering yourself and life. And you know, I grew up about half a mile from here, just by Central Park, so I had all the green space on my doorstep. I was about a mile from Argyle and the swimming pool, you know, so I had all those facilities there. The city centre was right on my doorstep, so, you know, I was pretty lucky in that respect that I could get up on a Saturday morning, you know, way before mobile phones existed, and all my friends would meet at a certain time and we'd go into town and just spend the day, you know, wasting time, you know, and just having fun as kids.
What were you like at school? What kind of pupil were you?
Academically, average. I've met a lot of my teachers, both from infant school through the juniors and primary over the years, you know, walking around Plymouth in town and stuff with my family. And the recurring theme that seems to come up with them is that I was very cheeky. You know, I wasn't overly naughty in school, but it was like cheeky naughty. I didn't go out my way to cause problems, but I think I was just restless a lot. You know, but I did all right in school. I came out with 10 GCSEs, 9 A to Cs, 1 D. I think I got 2 A's. I can't remember what they were in. I think English, oral, maybe drama. So I did a lot better than I thought I was going to do, considering, you know, how average I was academically at school. So, yeah.
And at what point did you start to think about the armed forces as a career choice?
So I remember it quite vividly. I was about 15 and a half, and I knew in, I don't know, it was just like maybe 6 to 12 months, I was going to be sitting my GCSEs. And then I knew that once they were over, I either had to go to college, then on to university and do something in that space, or go out into the big bad world and get a job. Now, I don't know why, I just kind of naturally felt that I didn't want to carry on with my education at that point. You know, I knew I could pick it up later in life, but I was done with it at that point. I wanted to go out and to make my way in the world. And I knew instinctively I didn't just want a job, I wanted a career, something that I could start at the bottom and work my way up over the years, and something where I could grow as an individual, which is very weird to think of for a 15 and a half year old. But I kind of knew in my gut that's the kind of path I wanted to lead. So I sat down before the exams and I started listing out potential careers for myself. And you know, there are thousands of careers that I could have chosen from, but I kind of felt naturally drawn to the ones what I would call the kind of alpha male careers. So fireman, policeman, military. So I sat down and did a pros and cons. Again, very weird for a 15-year-old to be doing this at this stage of their life, but I sat down and figured out what was good and what was bad about each one. And then everything led me to a career in the military. Now, despite being born and bred here in Plymouth and the Royal Marines having a big footprint in the city, I had no idea who they were. And as a young bloke, as a young kid, whenever someone said to me, about being a soldier, you automatically assumed army. They're the soldiers, they're the ones that do the infantry stuff.
Yeah.
So I went down to the career centre and got all the paperwork to go and join the army. Because I was so young, I had to get my parents' authorization to continue with the process. And then my dad told me that I had an uncle who was a captain in the Marines. He had started at the bottom, he'd worked his way up, done 22 plus years, and finished as a captain. So we went to see him. He only lives up in Buckfastleigh, so about half an hour in the car. And then he told me about his career in the military. I came back the following week, went down to the career centre again, but this time I went to the Royal Marine recruiting guy, sat down and watched that video, and from that minute on, that was it. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be one of those guys with the Green Beret. And that was it. I resubmitted my paperwork in that direction, went home, started doing all my research, because the internet was about at that point. So I got online and started researching the history of the Marines and what was entailed in the training. Started physically training myself, because I was just waiting pretty much for a letter to turn up to say when my start date was. And that was it. I joined when I was 16.
And you, by that stage, were quite fit anyway. Although you've talked about kind of a moment when you went from sort of a chubby young man to someone who was suddenly kind of very aware of fitness and training and working out.
Yeah, I'd been training since about 11 or 12 in the gym, but not really having any idea what I was doing. I didn't know about nutrition. I didn't know how to structure my training. I would just go in and do whatever until I was tired and then finish. So I had a very low baseline of physical fitness and knowledge about that kind of stuff, but nothing can really prepare you. You can be the fittest man on the planet and it can't really prepare you for what you're about to experience when you join the Marines.
Yeah. And tell us about that training and presumably selection process. What was that like? How hard was it?
So initially what you do is a 3-day, what they call the Potential Royal Marines course, which is an opportunity for people to go to the Commando Training Centre, and you basically get your ass kicked for 3 days, solid. And that gives you an opportunity to think, is this really for me? Do I really want to do this for 22 plus years? It gives the guys that are training you an opportunity to see whether you're ready or not. And you can, that is a pass or fail course. So if you fail it, you have to come back and retake that whenever they bring you back. And it just gives you a little taster of what it's going to be like for the next, the training now is 32 weeks long. If you factor in the leave periods, it's the best part of a year. So that 3 days, can you do that for nearly a year just to pass your training? And it was tough. And what I found out about that, or about myself on those 3 days and about the Royal Marines, was they weren't looking for the guy who's necessarily the fittest. They just wanted the guy that never stopped, the guy that was running and throwing up, the guy whose arms were blowing out but was still trying to climb a rope, the guy that couldn't do a press up but would still carry on trying. And that's what they were looking for. And it was just 3 days of just getting thrashed. And as a 16-year-old, that was quite hard. But that wasn't even the hardest part for me. The hardest part was being stuck in a room with like 45 strangers. Even though I was only 40 minutes up the road, I felt like I was on the other side of the world. And just being away from home and all that was really difficult as well. So it was a combination of factors, but I managed to pass that. I just said it's only 3 days. I could do anything for 3 days, and then was invited back once I turned 17, and then I was on that long journey, of 9 months plus of training to see if I had what it took to earn a Green Beret.
And where was the training? Was that also here?
So the training is in Lympstone in Exmouth. So it's only a 45-minute car journey from here. But like I said, you might as well be on the other side of the planet, because you're in this little bubble, and you just feel isolated from everything, which is good in a way because you're there to do something. You want to stay focused and on target. But I was only 17, and it was difficult. When we started the first day of training, I'm in a room, imagine a room with just 62 beds in it, with 62 strangers in it, and I think I was the second youngest guy there. So that's hard on its own, just being thrown into that lion's den with a bunch of strangers as, a boy still, and then just living life at 150 mile an hour from the get-go.
What was physically and mentally, what were the hardest things that you had to overcome?
Physically, it's all hard, but what's good is that it's progressive. So, you know, you turn up on day one, there's no way on day two you can do a 30-mile run effectively across Dartmoor with weight, but they progressively build you up over that time period. So when you get to that point of training, when it's still going to be hard, but it's very manageable because you're fit enough and you're prepared and you've got yourself ready for it. So physically, all of it was hard. And it's designed to be that way because they want to break you down and, like I just said, see who's going to quit when they physically think they can't go on any further. And mentally, you know, the physical side of it is hard mentally, trying to push yourself constantly to meet those targets and to meet the requirement. But mentally, what's hardest is when you imagine being thrown in a river. You go out in the field for 7 days, and the first day they throw you in a river, and they say, right, get your head under. And then for the next 7 days, you're cold, wet, tired, hungry. You're getting yomped across terrain like this with like 7, 8 stone on your back. And then 2 o'clock in the morning, when you're in your sleeping bag and your nice warm, dry clothes, you get a shake, and you've got to get up and put your soaking wet, freezing clothes on, and then lie in the grass for an hour because you're on what we call sentry, so you're protecting everyone else. And to do that, you know, again, for the best part of a year, being cold, wet, hungry, and sleep deprived, that's when I've seen the guys who are some of the fittest people I've ever met in my life quit because they can't do that part of it. So it's a big balance of mental and physical fitness.
Did you ever come close to quitting?
Every day. Every single day I wanted to quit. And I ended up breaking it down to a day-by-day process. When you sit there and you think, I've got 20 weeks left, I've got 18 weeks left, it's a long way. But when you just go, right, what have I got to do today? And then you wake up the next day and you go, what have I got to do today? And you just break it down like that. It's a lot more easy to digest and more manageable.
Do you ever think about what might have been for you had you quit and you'd gone off and done something else, is it?
I have no idea what I would have done. But I always remember when I wanted to quit, the thought of coming back to Plymouth on that train. And I knew inside that the second I stepped foot on that train, I would have regretted it. And then coming back and having to tell all my friends and family that I'd failed, that was what drove me on. I knew I couldn't face that. And then exactly what you just said, what am I going to do the rest of my life? I've got these 10 GCSEs, great, what's that going to give me? What doors will that open? You know, what can I do? And I had no idea. There was no other alternative for me.
So when you passed, what was the sense of achievement like from that?
Oh, it's massive. I used to come back to Plymouth and walk around it like I was God's gift. I'd walk around because I knew all my school friends and my family had known what I'd done. And some of them understood how hard it was and what it took, but not all of them. But you know, I just walked around this place differently, so much more confident. And even though I was only 18, you know, I felt like I had loads of experience in life because it was so intense, that year-long process, you know. So it was arrogance in the beginning. When you're a young man, you get quite arrogant with it. But I think by the time I turned 20, maybe about 20, I changed, and it was kind of like a quiet confidence, you know, which was nice to be able to have.
And I've seen that you went off to the States, Norway, Iraq. What were some of the highlights of that spell, you know, as it were, before we get to you leaving and you know, and rejoining? But that bulk of your Marines career, what was how do you think about that?
So Iraq was interesting because I was 19. You know, I'd earned my Green Beret, and that was my first taste of war, if you like. It was quite disappointing. It wasn't what I expected. It was very boring in Iraq. I didn't really do a lot. I never fired a round off. But I remember coming back thinking, you know, I'm only 19. I've achieved quite a lot. You know, I was a Royal Marine at 18, been to war at 19. You know, I've still got years ahead of me in my career. You know, imagine the possibilities of what I could do with the next 18, 19 years of my life. So, you know, that was quite an exciting time for me. And then going off to like Norway and stuff, that was really good, because if you go back to when I said I watched that video in the career centre, that's what sold it to me. I saw guys jumping out of planes. I saw guys going in by fast boats. I saw guys yomping everywhere. I saw guys in the Arctic, the desert, the jungle, the woodland, operating in all these environments. And I really wanted to just test myself in these different scenarios and become really well-rounded. So going to Norway was the first time I thought, okay, this is the first tick in the box. I can go out there, learn to survive in this environment, become a better soldier. then I'll come back and hopefully I can learn to jump out of a plane, and then I go to the jungle and learn to survive with all the creepy crawlies and all that's involved in that. So Norway was a highlight. And then, as well as, you know, being career focused and driven and wanting to grow as a person and develop in your career, stuff like going to America on exercise, that was the fun side of it. You got to go out, you got to do these exercises, which were good, you know, and you got to learn a lot. But then when they blow the whistle and the exercise is over and you're in America with all your friends, you get to run off and have a lot of fun as well and see the world. And again, you know, as a young man, that was quite exciting. You know, I felt I was growing in my career and as a soldier and as an individual, and then I was experiencing things outside of that as well, which a lot of people my age back then weren't experiencing.
So before you got to Afghanistan, had you fired around, for example? Was that?
Not in a conflict zone.
Okay.
Obviously, I'd fired hundreds and hundreds in training on the ranges and that kind of stuff, but never in defence or in a real life situation.
And at that stage, when are you? Is your commitment and your love of the Marines because of the people you're with? Are you aware of it from a kind of, I suppose, a kind of patriotic sense? You know, what was your loyalty towards, I suppose, in want of a better term?
When I was younger, it was a huge pride thing. Like I said, it's quite well documented around the world how hard the training is. So to have earned that Green Beret was massive for me. I used to walk around when I was in training looking at the corporals like they were gods. And then the sergeants were a step above that. And then, you know, the higher up the rank system you got, these guys with the Green Berets in their head, it just blew my mind. And just to be part of that family, you know, even with no rank, was huge. And it was just a massive part of my life that I was really, really proud of. And then as you started to get older and, you know, you change as a person and you progress and you look at things differently, you know, I guess if you want representing my country or defending my country was a big part of it for me. You know, it was nice when I came back from Iraq, even though I was 19 and I didn't feel like I did a lot and I didn't contribute much to that conflict, it was still nice to come back and I thought I did a little bit, you know, and I gave something, I contributed basically to something bigger than me, you know, so it became a bit of a mix of both really, of pride of being part of that little family and being a Royal Marine and then doing something for other people.
What were you doing in Iraq? What stage of the conflict was that out?
Right at the beginning.
Okay.
So we spent about a month in Kuwait preparing.
Yeah.
And it was quite scary, you know, because we were getting hit, you know, there's the whole thing about weapons of mass destruction and chemical weapons. And, you know, I remember being sat in a trench and just scuds going over our head and one of them landed like a K away from us. And I had this suit on with a respirator on and I'm sat in a trench and, you know, how hot it is in places like that. And I'm just sweating and I'm looking at my mate through these little eye holes in this respirator, just waiting for like my skin to start boiling, you know, because you heard everyone said like, one's landed, and you just sit there, there's nothing you can do. And you just shitting yourself that, you know, your lungs are going to start burning or something because you can't see this stuff, you can't smell it. So, you know, that was pretty terrifying. But after that first month, we were like pretty much the first wave of guys that pushed over the border, went into Iraq. I personally, the guys I was working with took over a place called Azerbaijan Naval Base. We used that as an outpost to work from. Some of my friends from a different unit went and took the palace, and then some other guys went to the oil fields. And there was a bit of fighting, you know, not a massive amount, there was a little bit. Then just took those positions and held them until we left. We were only there for 3.5 months.
Right. And did you get a sense of any of the sort of wider country?
No, nothing. You know, I was a bottom of the run Marine, did what I was told, had no idea about the bigger picture, what was going on outside of the little bubble that I was living in. It was literally a case for me of, he's got more rank than me, he's told me to do something, I'm going to do that. I'm a young guy, don't want to upset anybody, and had no idea, you know, of people's political views or any of that kind of stuff. I was just in there, stood with my friends, doing what I was told to do.
And what, so, you know, fast forward to kind of 2005, you start to think about, you know, ending your not association with it, but coming out of the Marines and doing something else. What prompted that?
So my daughter was born, my first daughter Kezia, in January 2005. And my thinking behind it was, you know, when I get to my 5-year point, I've achieved this Green Beret at 18, I've been to war at 19, I've got a daughter now, I can come out at the 5-year point, and that's quite a lot to have achieved in, you know, my young life at that point. And I'll be young enough to take the skills that I'd learned then and transfer them into a civilian job. I didn't really know what I was going to do. You know, like I said earlier, I still had that, when I was 15, I looked at the police and the fire brigade. So those were options to me. But I didn't really know what it was I wanted to do. I kind of made a hasty decision and thought, you know, I'm going to leave and just pick up as a civvy where I can be around a bit more, you know, and provide a bit of stability. So that's what I did. I put my notice in January 2005, just after she was born, and then started that process to leaving.
And then, and so you then went and did some bodyguard training, and that was where you saw yourself.
Yeah, things didn't work out how I had planned. I separated from my daughter's mother in December, I think it was 2005, and I had really failed in that process leading up to leaving. You know, you're given 12 months. The good thing is that's a lot of time. The bad thing is, if you need to be whipped off an exercise for 3 months, that's what you do. And that takes 3 months out of that process. And, you know, I was young and stupid, and I just thought I'll do what everyone else does and do security or something like that. And it was probably 8 weeks before I left when I actually sat down and thought I better retrain now and do something. And so I very quickly got all my paperwork together and went, right, I'm going to go to South Africa and do some bodyguard training, because I've been in the Marines, I've been to Iraq, anyone's going to employ me. You know, I'll get work easy as a bodyguard. So I did that. You know, I went out to South Africa it was 2006, spent 6 weeks out there, retrained, came back home, struggled a little bit initially. I had no fixed address, was just staying at friends' houses and sleeping in the car and stuff like that. Got a job as a bouncer, a nightclub doorman, to try and earn some cash while I was waiting for the bodyguard work to pick up, but it never came. I didn't know anyone in the industry. I had no experience in that industry. I was naive as hell, thinking that I could just live off a 5-year reputation in the Marines and just jump straight in the bodyguarding world. It didn't work that way. So I just carried on working as a nightclub doorman, and it was at the time when the SIA were introducing licensing and the police were really cracking down on it, and I just found myself in trouble all the time. Just, you know, nearly every weekend I ended up in Charles Cross. Not through any fault of my own, 90% of the time. It was just a really bizarre period where, I mean, this sounds exaggerated, but I could be stood on the front door of a nightclub working, get punched in the face, and then get arrested for hurting some guy's knuckles. It was just weird. And I panicked. You know, I thought, this is not the way I want my life to go. I could end up in a lot of trouble here. And so I went back to the careers centre one Monday morning and said, look, here's the deal. I've been a civilian for about a year now. I failed, take me back. Signed some paperwork. And then because I had only been a civilian for about a year, there was no need to go through that whole 32 weeks of training again. It was just annual tests that we do anyway, which is, you know, shooting, fitness, get thrown in an NBC chamber and CS gassed for a bit. And then I was back in uniform again, back in 2007.
And at this point you met Becky, or?
So I met Becky when I was working as a nightclub doorman. You know, she was here at Plymouth University doing a top-up degree in public service management. And her and her friends that she lived with used to come down to this cheesy little 70s and 80s club that I worked at. And I don't know, something about her just caught my eye. And a lot of my friends were actually trying to crack onto her at the same time. And she would come in every weekend and we'd have a bit of banter. And I'd ask her for a number and she kept telling me no. And then one day, just joking, I said, look, I know you like this club, you're down here all the time. I've asked you for your number multiple times now. This is the last time I'm going to ask you. If you don't give it to me, you're banned. It kind of like trying to come across serious, but jokingly in the same way. And I ended up getting it. So, you know, we went out on some dates. She was still here studying. I wasn't doing much in the day, just working the doors at night. And yeah, we just, you know, got into a relationship and, God, what is it now, 13, 14 years later? Married, more kids, you know, cracking on.
And so how did she feel when you got the call to go out to Afghanistan? Was she very nervous about that?
I think so. I mean, part of the course that she was doing when she was at college back in Surrey with the public services, she worked a lot with the military and the Marines in particular. So she kind of knew a little bit about it and what it was all about. And even though we hadn't been together for that long, she knew that I wasn't happy with where I was in my life, and that, you know, being in the Marines was me. And that's where I was happiest, and that was where I was the best version of myself. And so, you know, it's bizarre because she could have turned around and went, all right, you go do that, I'm going to go do this, maybe we'll meet up later on in life. But she was like, you know, if that's what's going to make you happy, go do that. And so I did. And I think she was nervous about going to Afghanistan. You know, I think that's just a natural emotion for most people, you know, in your loved one's circle to kind of feel. But she knew, I think from the day that she met me, that unless I'm doing the things that make me happy, I'm not happy. And I really wanted to do that. You know, I really wanted to go out there and see how different it was from Iraq. I really wanted to test myself. And I really wanted to see if all this training that I'd done to that point, you know, I could really put into action in a real life situation, you know, and test myself.
And how was, you know, how did Afghanistan differ to Iraq? How much of a shock was it going back and your first posting being out there in, you know, in a very dangerous war zone?
I mean, in terms of how I felt, I was quite excited about it. But in terms of how were they different, Iraq and Afghanistan, you can't even compare them. They are completely different. You know, in Afghanistan, from the minute you land in a helicopter, you know, initially you get flown into a safe zone called, it was either Camp Bastion or Camp Kandahar, and then you will jump on the back of a helicopter 2 or 3 days later and get taken out to what are called FOBs, forward operating bases, which are scattered all over Helmand province. And from the minute you land in your FOB, it's just mayhem. You know, you're put straight into a routine, and then you could be getting attacked or tasked with patrols at any hour of the day. You know, there are points where I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I was in my bed and I ran down to a watchtower, what we call a sentry post, that we had responsibility for, in nothing but a helmet and a pair of pants. And then you're getting in a firefight at 3 o'clock in the morning. Whereas, you know, Iraq was completely different. You just went days and days and days without doing anything. You know, it was very boring, it seemed to drag. Whereas this tour, you know, the days were flying by because it was so kinetic and you were doing so much. You were always out on the ground, you were always conducting missions, you were always defending your positions. So it was better because it's what I expected war to be like, and it was what I wanted to do, you know, the way I wanted to test myself. But obviously it's a lot more dangerous.
And presumably you were then in a situation where you were firing kind of in, you know, in active combat.
Pretty much every day. And like I say, any hour of the day. You know, if you're out on a patrol during the day and you're out conducting missions, gathering intelligence and dominating the ground and taking the fight to the enemy. But then there could be times where you're back in camp, you know, and you guys you're working with are manning those sentry posts, and you're maybe having a cup of tea, you know, working out or whatever, and then the alarm goes, and then you're back there and you're fighting off an attack or whatever it is. It could happen at any time.
Was it, at that time, was it, were the dangers, obviously the dangers are self-evident, but the term IEDs become, you know, they're all, you know, it was a kind of a hidden, pernicious kind of something that could easily get into someone's consciousness of, you know, that they could be sort of anywhere, and we think, you know, we've seen the damage that they do. Were you as Marines conscious about the kind of the dangers of hidden explosive devices at that time?
Yeah, we had extensive lectures on it before, and intelligence briefs and updates and that kind of stuff. And it's quite funny because we always used to say, we'll stand toe to toe with anybody in a firefight, a fist fight, a knife fight, whatever you want. But the one thing that worried us all was losing the leg. And we'd all say, that's not how we want to go back. I'd rather go back in a body bag than missing a leg. And that was the one thing that worried us all. And then, you know, ironically, even though you always think, oh, it never happened to me, it did. And I was when I took it for the team.
What do you remember about that day in terms of the kind of events leading up to?
All of it. From the early morning call up to get a brief, about 6 in the morning, called up to be told what our patrol was wanting to achieve, going back and prepping all our kit, and then leaving that day, getting blown up, being evacuated, taken out of a minefield, put in a vehicle, taken to a helicopter landing site. And the last thing I remember from the entire day was a helicopter landing, and like the kind of noise of the tailgate dropping, and then I blacked out after that, which according to the medics was when I died. So yeah, I remember it all, which I think I'm quite fortunate to do, because a lot of the guys that I went through rehab with, I think they would like be knocked out or lose consciousness through blood loss or whatever, and then later on in life, a couple of years later, they may have flashbacks where the stored memories come back, and I don't suffer from that because I remember it all. So I think in a way I'm quite lucky.
I read that you initially it felt you were in a dream. It was a nightmare.
Yeah, it's very surreal, because I remember once the dust cloud had settled and I saw my legs, and after I saw some of my team, I then saw my arm, but I wasn't in any pain, and it's just like an intense throbbing, like a pins and needles feeling. And I remember looking at all this damage, thinking, this ain't me, this isn't happening. I'm probably just having a nightmare. I'm back in my bed, and then I'll wake up in a minute, go lift some weights and de-stress and get on my job, because it just didn't hurt. And again, you think it will never happen to me, this isn't happening to me, and it just feels very surreal. And I think that's probably the case for any traumatic incident, a car crash or a fall off a height or anything like that. It would feel the same way. But it's just your body's natural way of coping and reacting to it. When the adrenaline starts flowing, that's how you deal with it. It's incredible.
Did you step on it or did you kneel?
I kind of knelt on it. I was getting down onto my stomach. We were in a bowl in the ground, and I think the thing must have been at an angle. And as I had one arm down on the ground, I think, and one knee. And as I went to get on the other knee, because I had so much weight on my back, I knelt on it, and that's maybe why this arm was damaged and this one wasn't, because it was slinging my rifle back, and the blast must have missed it.
And did you feel anything, hear anything, a split second that where you suddenly, it was just literally.
And that's another conversation that we used to have. We're like, you got to be pretty stupid to get blown up by an IED, because the ground, it would be so easy to see when someone's dug in it. The fresh ground would have been dug up, and it would be easy to detect. But I think in this bowl, where it had rained and stuff, all the ground had smoothed over the top of it, and like bits of debris had come down, and it was impossible to see. And I honestly thought that, I never considered that kind of stuff. So I thought, if someone's going to dig an IED in the ground, it's going to be so easy to spot, and it just wasn't. And there were 7 of these things in this little area that we were operating in.
Yeah. And what's your? You just said you the conversation was rather a body bag than losing a leg, or worse. What are your thoughts and feelings for that team that got you back and conducted really extraordinary work in the circumstances to keep you from dying?
So for me personally, that's why going out to these places didn't really make me nervous, because I knew how professional the guys I was going to be working with were. Even if they weren't the people that I trained with in the UK, I knew that, that's what it was. The guys I was working with, I hadn't met half of them before. They were from different parts of my unit, different specialist qualifications, different trades. They just put us together. And because we'd all been through the same training, even though it wasn't together, we knew how to operate as a unit. And I had so much confidence in those people. And that's why going out to these dangerous places never bothered me, because I knew I was always going to be looked after by the blokes that I was working with. But, those guys will always have my ultimate respect and love, because the way they dealt with that was phenomenal. In that situation, we're trained. You imagine as a human being, if you see your friend hurt, your initial instinct is to go run into that guy and try and help him. But we're trained not to do that. Because you imagine, I've set off this IED, there are 7 more in the area. If you come tearing in there, you can either set another one off and kill yourself, or you could kill me. So we're trained not to do that. And each man in our section will have their own individual responsibility should that situation occur. So one guy will get straight on the radio and call in a medic and an evacuation. One guy will coordinate like a defensive cordon. So if there's a small arms follow-up attack, we're defensive and we're tight. The guy closest to you will pull out his bayonet or something similar, and he'll start prodding the ground for other devices, and then he'll clear left and right of him. So when the medic gets there, he can run straight in through a safe zone to get to me to help me. And they all just did it perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, the guy that was closest to me that cleared that route had only passed out of training about 8 weeks previous. He literally passed out of training, had a couple of weeks off, and then flown to Afghanistan. You know, I think he was 19 years old. And just to hold it together like that and to do his job without panicking, without getting flustered, just do what he was trained to do was phenomenal. And that's the reason why I didn't die.
Yeah.
Because they didn't get emotional, they remembered what they were trained to do, and they did it, you know, to the highest possible standard.
And so you were unconscious for 3 days, pretty much.
3 days, yeah, when I got home.
And that period is just black.
Just asleep for 3 days, basically. I don't remember anything from any of that.
And what were your first memories of waking up in Celio? How were you able to even compute what had just happened?
I don't know. I just feel very lucky in the fact that when I woke up, I wasn't panicked, I wasn't scared, I wasn't nervous or anything like that. I remember, you know, like in a movie where someone's getting rushed into ER and the camera just shows the blurry lights of the ceiling. I remember that. And I was trying to open my eye. I could hear everyone around me, and everything anyone was saying would echo like 2 or 3 times. And I tried to open my eyes, and I couldn't do it. It was like someone had put lead weights on my eyelids. And I was lying there, and I didn't really know where I was, but I felt kind of calm because I could hear their voices. And I tried focusing all my energy to my eyelids to open my eyes, and I couldn't do it. I don't know if it was the drugs or just being so weak at that point, but I couldn't do it. And I started trying to mumble something, and I had an oxygen mask on, and I was thinking, they can't hear me because I'm just, and I didn't really know where I was. And then I could hear Becky beside me, I could hear a couple of other voices, and she heard me trying to mumble and said, I think he's waking up. And so she took the mask off, and I didn't even have the energy really to say anything. And I don't know why it happened or why I was thinking this way, but I just remember hearing Becky's voice, and I didn't know where I was, and I just proposed to her in an intensive care unit, and then fell back to sleep. And when I woke up the next day, it was just so exhausting just to even try and speak and open my eyes that I just fell back to sleep straight away.
Now you had been in the process of writing a letter to Becky's dad, hadn't you? To ask for her hand in marriage, and so what prompted actually to you to ask her that? You know, had it been in your mind, or do you even know where that kind of came
it had.
from?
Like I said, you know, I'd written the letter. It was in an ammo container under my bed. I was actually going to send it the day that I got blown up, but it was an early morning patrol, so I didn't get around to it. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's corny, I know, but it's just kind of like when you know, you know. And I hated being away from Becky. I remember being on North Hill, just behind us here, when I picked up a day job as I was rejoining, driving a truck for a scaffolding company. And I was working on the estate agent's Fulfords on the corner. And I remember checking my phone every 5 minutes to see if she texted me back, and then getting pissed off that she was in one of these buildings here, and I was like, why isn't she texting me back? And then I kind of thought, well, you know, that's what made her different to me, to other women. You know, I felt differently. You know, I was getting upset when she wasn't texting me back, and when I was away, I was always thinking about her. So it just kind of felt right.
What sort of role did she play in kind of that period that follows when you're having to kind of adjust to the injuries that you've suffered?
Yeah, I mean, she was huge in that whole thing. I always remember thinking she should just leave now and go, because we've only been together about a year, and she just got a degree, and her family live up in Surrey, and I live in Plymouth, and it's pretty shit for her. So, you know, I'm not going to get upset. I am going to get upset, but I'm not going to ever hold it against her if she just goes, look, I can't deal with this. You know, I'm young, I've got my whole life ahead of me. So, you know, I would never have held it against her if that's the path that she chose to walk, but she didn't, and she stuck around for some reason, and she helped me get through a lot of shit. You know, a lot of people over the years saw part of my journey, and as I got more into like social media and stuff, they saw another part of it, but they didn't see the 2 o'clock in the morning part of it when I'm up and, you know, I'm fighting for prosthetics funding, or I'm pissed off because I don't feel like I'm achieving enough for my rehab, or I'm in absolute agony when my groin's been sliced open and I've got blisters on my legs. No one really saw that part apart from her, you know. And in the beginning, as you imagine, you know, it's very frustrating trying to rebuild your life, learn to walk, think about a job and a career, and, you know, all the other things that were outside of my rehab immediately, trying to deal with all of that and to do something positive in my life. It got quite frustrating. You know, and she saw me for months sat up at 2, 3 in the morning, trying to put my life in order, but coming up against these roadblocks all the time, and bureaucracy and red tape and stuff that was always holding me back. So, you know, and she stuck around through all of that too.
At what point was it the doctor said to you that, you know, there was no prospect you'd be walking again, the wheelchair was your, you know...
Was about 3.5 weeks after I was blown up.
Right.
I was in Selly I'd come out of intensive care. I was upstairs in a single high dependency room, and this guy just walks in, quite blasé, non-emotional, and said, "My name is," I don't remember what his name is, "My name's Dr. So-and-so. I'm the UK's amputation specialist. I've been doing this for 33 years. You know, I'm sorry to tell you, but I've never met anybody who's got one leg missing above the knee that has any success with prosthetics." He said they were too painful, they were too difficult to use, and they took so much energy that most people would put them on, make a cup of tea, then get back in a wheelchair. And then he left. You know, and that was the first of, there were only 2 low points in my recovery, and that was the first one, when that guy came in and said that and then left, because I was 24 years old. You know, I was still in my head, you know, a fully functioning Royal Marine, and this guy's saying, you know, you're going to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair with people looking after you and pushing you around and driving you around and helping you with things. And, you know, I didn't want to hear that, you know, at that point in my rehab. So that was the first low point for me, really.
And the second?
The second was when I got my first day out of hospital. And I went over to the flat that my family was staying in. And it was in a tower block of flats. And so I got pushed in through the communal entrance. I got pushed in through the main door of the flat, but I couldn't access any of the rooms. So while everyone was having a takeaway, I had to sit in the hallway in my wheelchair, you know, eating outside. I had to pee in a milk bottle, you know, because I couldn't get in the toilet. And then eventually we figured out a way to get me into the bedroom at night. And when I got in there, it was just me and Becky. And it was the first time I'd gone past a full-length mirror. You know, I looked at my face in the mirror and shaved and brushed my teeth in hospital. But it's the first time I went through a full-length mirror, and I saw what I looked like in this wheelchair. And you know, I don't mind admitting I spent that entire night crying, because I used to be 6'2". I used to weigh about 16 stone and be really fit physically, you know, and mentally. And then I was, I think, 8 stone 11 or something. And without prosthetics, I'm 4 foot tall now. And I just thought, how did I go from that to this? And how am I going to spend the rest of my life like this, with people looking after me? You know, I didn't really want to imagine my future like that. You know, so I spent most of that night crying with Becky, just like, this is shit, I don't want to do this.
And how did you get out of that, you know, that tailspin? I think you referred to it as a pity party at one point. How did you climb out?
I just snapped out of it pretty quickly. You know, the main thing that got me through hospital and through rehab was that pride I talked about with being a Royal Marine. I always remember thinking, I don't know how old we were back then, maybe 350 years old the Marines were at that point. And I always remember thinking, I've got 350 years worth of history on my shoulders now. You know, all these men that went before me that have done these great things. If I give up here and if I say it's too hard and I can't do it and I start moaning, you know, I'm going to be embarrassing 350 years worth of Royal Marines history. And that got me through a lot of tough times. Just thinking that, you know, if I'm serving or if I'm retired, I'm always going to be known now as a former Royal Marine. And so the way I act and the way I conduct myself and the way I approach things has to be in line with how I was taught in training, and the standards have to be equally as high. That's what I've got to strive for every day. And so, you know, it snaps you out of those low points quite quickly when you think that way.
And at what point do you What point did you receive your first prosthetic limbs? How much further down the line was that?
That was frustrating as well because I've got a large chunk of flesh missing out my left leg. I had burns that were bandaged up all down my back. There was a point on my arm that just wouldn't heal. So I had to wait for about 3 months when I got to rehab for all that to heal before I got prosthetics. Because if I just jumped into them and I did further damage, it meant more surgeries. Yeah. So that was quite frustrating because I just wanted to get the legs and the arm and start learning to use them. But in the interim, where they explained to me, the physios, that not having calves, feet, knees and that kind of stuff meant I had to retrain my glutes, my core, my back and all those kind of muscles. We used that time where I was healing to start strengthening all those muscles. So as soon as I got to rehab, I jumped straight into training. And I attacked it holistically. I started looking at my diet, my rest, my recovery, stretching and mobility. And then I just took on board all what they were teaching me with strengthening all these muscles. And I thought, if I do this now, I'm going to prepare myself better for when I get the legs, and I'm going to be stronger and fitter and able just to get going straight off the bat. Yeah. So that's what I did. I just focused on all that kind of stuff until about 3 months in, when I got my first set of legs and started learning to walk again.
Where did the rehab take place?
Headley Court, up in Surrey.
Yeah. Which is where you met Prince Harry for the first time.
Yes, yeah, they came to visit, Prince Harry and William, probably 2000, it was either late 2008 or early 2009, because I was in a wheelchair. So that would have been all prior to June 2009.
And when you first started to use the prosthetic limbs, were you had you really built up the moment in your mind of that, okay, this is a chance that this could be transformative. So were you putting yourself under a lot of pressure to make them, to make it work, or?
No, I didn't put myself under any pressure. It was either the quiet confidence we talked about, or the arrogance, or maybe naivety. But I always remember the first day of walking thinking, I'm fit as hell, I'm a Royal Marine, just give me the legs and get out of my way. And I got them on eventually after about an hour, 45 minutes of trying. Stood up in the parallel bars, which was hard, enough as it was. And I remember feeling terrified of, I think I was maybe set at 6 foot then, and it felt like I was stood on the edge of Everest, looking over the edge. And I was looking at the floor, and because I was still quite sore and tender. Yeah. And I thought, if I fall now, this is going to really hurt. And I was just gripping this parallel bar for dear life and just taking one step at a time. And the knees weren't bending, and they were falling off. And I had these straps all around my stomach to hold them on. And it was awful. And I got to the other end eventually, which is about 5 meters, and I was done. I was exhausted. And I remember thinking what that doctor said about how hard it was. And I was like, shit, this guy was right. This is going to be really difficult. And took them off straight away and went back to my room and just went to bed. I was gone. And it was a big eye opener that first time.
And how quickly did you start to kind of master them, I suppose?
I'll let you know. The thing about prosthetics is every day is different. Yeah. I've just recently changed into these legs now from my other ones, which are technically exactly the same, but when you change them, they never feel the same. So it takes a couple of days to get used to them, and then maybe one day you need to change an adjustment to the alignment, and because it's not working right walking down hills, and you have to really proactively get involved in your life now and learn about how these work and how to adjust them, and what works best for you. But June 2009 was the last time I ever used a wheelchair, so that was the day I'd say that I mastered them, if you like, and became independent.
And that was in America?
It was, I flew out to Oklahoma, and that was the last time I used a chair. But every day is different, and in rehab, same as when I was in my training for the Marines, I just broke it down into day by day. And I kind of adopted this mindset of improving by 1% every day, and even if it was just one more step that I took in those parallel bars, I was still moving forward and making progress, rather than taking some sort of scattergun approach of having 3 days off and then trying to walk 20 steps or improve by 50%. I just thought, break it down, do a little bit more every day, and then, you know, by the end of the month, look back at how far you've come from the beginning of the month. You know?
How important was that intensive 3 weeks in the States?
That's what changed my life. You know, I was the UK's first triple amputee from Afghanistan, and I'd met other triple amputees that had came to visit me in hospital, but, you know, no disrespect, they were all in wheelchairs and they were happy to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to live my life in a wheelchair, so I found a guy called Cameron Clapp over in America, who was hit by a train when he was 15 and had similar injuries to me, both legs above the knee, but his arm was kind of through the shoulder. And this guy was just killing it. You know, he was surfing, doing triathlons, he was driving on adaptive vehicles, he was a motivational speaker, you know, he was doing all the social media stuff, and I just thought, that's what I want to achieve. So that's why I flew out to America back in 2009. I contacted Cameron online, you know, spoke to him and his team. They invited me out and they said, we're going to take you through a 3-week boot camp where you can learn from Cameron and take what has taken him 5 years to learn and learn it in 3 weeks. So I just went out there, and it was very similar to going back through Royal Marines training when I was 17. Just a lot of pain, a lot of hard work, a lot of sitting up at night questioning myself, wondering if I've got what it takes to achieve it, wondering if I can be as independent as this guy, and just, again, breaking it down day by day. Getting up in the morning, you know, in a lot of pain, and just putting them on and just saying, just make it for another day, just make it for another day. And doing that for 3 weeks solid. But that, you know, it was what I call short-term pain for long-term gain. And I knew that at the end of that 3 weeks, I'd be much more independent than I was when I got there, and that potentially I could just leave that wheelchair behind for the rest of my life.
And how would you describe to somebody who you know who doesn't know, you know, doesn't understand what you've been through, how difficult is it to kind of manage prosthetic limbs? What does it put you through?
So I don't know if you ever did this when you were a kid. Maybe I'm just weird, but sometimes I'd get on my knees and I'd grab the laces on my shoes and pull my heel up to my bum and walk around my front room like that. So if you did that, if you got on your knees and you pulled your heel to your bum on both legs and put one hand behind your back, that's pretty much what it feels like for me walking around on prosthetics. This is what I try to say to people and challenge them to do. I say, just try doing it for one day. And you know, you've got the energy expenditure to think about, the balance to think about, readjusting to think about. You've got the frustration to deal with of everything being slower. That's one of the things that still gets me the most is, you know, whereas before I used to be able to run from one place to the other and, you know, jump over a wall, you know, now you've just got to look at things and assess them before you do them and just accept the fact that you're going to be slower than you used to be. You know, but that's how difficult it is. You know, just try doing that for half a day. You know, and then you'll get a bit of a sense of it. Yeah.
What once you were back from the US, over what sort of period of time did it take for you to start to kind of think, okay, we're now on to kind of the next phase in life, and here are some of the things I want to do?
That was immediate.
Right.
As soon as I got back, I thought, okay, cool. We've done this. We've ticked the box. We left the wheelchair behind. I'm at this stage of my rehab. What is next? And I knew when I thought about it properly that my career was over. I'd done a little bit of work in what they called a graduated return to work program, which is when I went to 4-2 Commando out on Dartmoor. They were deployed on Operation Herrick 9, so there was hardly anyone on camp anyway. And the point was that I would drive myself to work, dress myself, and they put me in a clerical position where I'd sit behind a computer in the pay office. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And people would come in and I felt embarrassed to start with, you know, because even that they couldn't see what was wrong with me, but I was just like, everything took me so long. I didn't know the job, that I was not trained in that job, so I didn't know what I was doing. And I just thought, I can't do this for the next 10, 15 years of my career. I inquired about going on courses for training and then, you know, looking at promotion. And from the answers that I got, I knew the best I could probably get would be like an acting corporal. And again, well, that would have been great for like a year, knowing that I couldn't progress to be a sergeant or whatever it is I wanted to do, kind of made me think, do I really want to do this? You know, there's got to be something better I can do. So I came back from America and was like, right, time to leave. And so I started that process. I set a date for the 1st of July 2010. It's a bit different to when you leave normally. You can kind of pick when you leave if you like. And I gave up, I think, 90 days worth of leave just because I thought, what's the point in dragging it out? Just pick the date and go with it. Started sorting all my affairs out and getting myself in order. Got a house, you know, my pension and that kind of stuff, got all that sorted out. And then left on the 1st of July 2010.
And was that scary? Kind of severing
Not as
ties
scary
and-
as the first time.
Okay.
Because, you know, financially you had a pension that you could survive on, so you didn't have to worry about getting work immediately, so it wasn't too bad. I had sorted out where I was going to live, so that was all sorted. I had no job prospects, which, because I had the pension, wasn't too big of a deal. And because I live here in Plymouth, I knew I was always going to be around the Marines, no matter what. You know, I had that luxury of having it on my doorstep, whereas a lot of guys that I went through rehab with aren't so lucky. They would leave and go back to Blackburn or wherever and just be kind of isolated, I guess. So it wasn't too scary for me the second time around.
And how long was it before you joined the Royal Marines Association?
So I had agreed to take part in a run across America that we were going to do in September 2010. So as soon as I came out in July, I already kind of had my eye on that goal, and that's what I was going to do to push myself a bit physically and to try and give back to these charities that had helped me and my family. And about 4 weeks after I left, while I was in the middle of training for this event, I got a call off of a retired brigadier who was the chief executive of the Royal Marines Association. And he said, you know, this is who I am, Brigadier Charlie Hobson, this is what I do. I work for the RMA, would you like a job? I'm like, yeah, doing what? He said, I don't know, we'll figure something out. And just made a job up for me as the welfare and operations assistant within the organisation. So I was like, this is perfect. You know, I'm literally going to leave, have a little bit of time off, and then go back into a job working with the Marines, which is going to make me feel like I've never left. So I went out to America, which was great because technically I was working while I was there because one of the charities was the Royal Marines Association. So I was out there raising the profile and raising money for them. And then when I came back, I got an office in the rehab unit that I just left. So the guys that I was going through rehab with, as my mates left and right of me now, were coming to me for like help and advice, which is kind of unofficially the role that a sergeant would take in the military. You'd look after the guys and make sure that they were sorted out and squared away. And it kind of felt like I'd been promoted. And I was in a room where the guys that I was working beside were my staff the day prior, the colour sergeants and the sergeant majors. Now I was working beside them as a civilian. And it just felt really good. I just felt like I hadn't left, that I'd been promoted, that I was helping people, and that I still had that protective bubble around me, I guess, of the Royal Marines.
You've carried on pushing yourself to you know, a huge degree. How have you found those efforts? Are they things that you are addicted to, but have they given you something that very meaningful in that?
What I found good about them, so when I came back from America, I knew what was possible to achieve. You know, having met Cameron and been given the right technology and the setup, and obviously being physically, you know, a fit person, that was part of my life. And I looked at these challenges as a way to challenge myself physically and mentally, but also at the same time, use that platform to give back to the charities that had helped me and my family. So it was a win-win-win-win-win-win-win-win for me, because everything about it was positive. I could challenge myself, I could try out new technology, I could set myself new goals, I could raise awareness for charities, I could give back, I could say thank you, and you know, it all just worked out perfect. And you know, I did the first one and I realised how much I enjoyed it, and then just carried on taking them on from there.
And is the Invictus, the experience of Invictus, is that kind of part of that same thing, or was that
No.
something more kind of, you know, for
That was more of a
yourself?
personal thing. So the whole Invictus Games thing came about in 2016 when I was sat down, probably this time of year, mapping out the following year. And Christmas Eve 2017 was my 10-year anniversary. So I thought, why don't I do something that I've not done before? You know, like I said, I'd left the Marines, I'd left the wheelchair, I'd got a new job, I got married, you know, the kids, I had 2 more children since then. secured housing, all that kind of stuff was done. And the one thing that I hadn't done was sport. And the main reason was because the sports that were on offer were nothing I'd ever done before.
Yeah.
You know, I'd never done athletics or track events or anything like that. You know, I'd cycled a little bit, swam a little bit, but never at any level. So it didn't really interest me. But then I'd seen a lot of my friends and people within rehab do the Invictus games when, I think 2014 when they were created, and you know, go out and win medals and move forward in their rehab and move forward in their life. And I thought, I'll give that a shot. You know, I didn't even think I'd make the team. I just applied for it and thinking, you know, I don't want to dip my toe in the water, if you like, and just do some local stuff. I want to just dive straight in and see who the best guys are around and see if I can compete. So I applied, was quite fortunate, I made the team, and then started training for it. And it was a lot different than I expected, you know.
And which of those, in those first games you did rowing, you did the cycling, you did the swimming the first year as well?
Yeah, rowing, swimming, cycling, yeah.
And how did you, which was the hardest, I suppose, in the mix?
It's difficult because I always remember physically the rowing being the hardest. I had no idea what I was doing, and I just purely did everything based on brute force and ignorance, and just thinking that I was fitter than I was. I didn't know about strategy, technique. You know, I had no game plan about when to, you know, sprints and you know, all that kind of stuff. I just went like a lunatic at every training session, at every competition, just hoping that I'd win. But the cycling was difficult as well because I only got my bike 6 days prior to flying out to Canada, and the thing I've been training on was so bad that every training session I went to, I had to thrash myself just to keep up with some of the team. You know, where we would do certain drills where they could relax, even in the relaxing phase, I was still going like a lunatic because my bike was so bad. That's the only way I can keep up with these people. So I was destroying myself doing the cycling just because I had to. And the swimming was difficult because I only got the one arm, you know, and that was all technique and trying to figure out the best way for me to swim and take on board all the coaching. So none of it was easy. It was all difficult for loads of different reasons. But physically, what hurt the most was definitely the rowing.
And then you broke your crank on the start line of the...
That was a disaster. You know, I trained on this new bike for about 6 days. We'd been around the courses. And the thing as well I didn't realise about these sports, like cycling, it can get so technical, not just from the gear that you use and the kit, but the way guys they're relentless about cycling these tracks and finding the tiniest advantage in like a camber in the road or in all these different things. And I didn't have a clue about any of that. So I just went at it like a lunatic. And the first race I did, when I pushed off the start line, that my handlebar just moved forward, and I just started having to accelerate this thing in a way that I wasn't used to, that the bike wasn't designed to use and to move like. And I crashed out of that first event. I got to the bottom of this hill, I couldn't steer around the corner, I went over a drain, my chain came off, and you know, I failed that first one. And then in the second race, I came 8th out of 11, which wasn't too bad because I kind of set my goal then. The only thing I really wanted to do, all this like drafting they teach you, I'd never experienced it because of my bike. I was sat so upright that you couldn't streamline anybody. And I just wanted to feel what it felt like and overtake someone. And I was the only guy in the whole race with one arm. So I just thought, if I can do that, I'll be happy. And I did it to like 2 or 3 people. And like I say, I came 8th out of 12, I think. But that was cool for me. I didn't realise how high level the cyclists were. And the thing as well, you know, with cycling, if you've got a lot of money and you can buy the best kit, it's a huge advantage. Whereas like rowing, you're all sat on a Concept 2 rower. Swimming, you're all sat in the same trunks, goggles and hat within reason. You know, it doesn't make a massive difference. But in cycling, you know, my bike was £9,000, but the guys from like France, you're looking at 25 plus, and they were just like, they were gone. You know, so that was a big, you know, advantage in cycling as well.
So in 2017 you won 2 silvers, 2 bronzes? Was that?
2 silvers and 2 bronzes, and then they had an award from Jaguar Land Rover for like athlete of the games, and I got that too.
And you met again while receiving one of the medals, Prince Harry again.
Yeah, he presented me the silver medal for the rowing, which was kind of nice. And we caught up and had a chat in the run up to the games and all that kind of stuff anyway. But that was a special moment, you know, to get your medal presented by Prince Harry. It's pretty cool, and my kids saw that too, which was nice.
And he remembered meeting you at Headley Court previous to that?
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of stuff in the media, but he does a lot more than that as well, and he's always visiting, and you know, it always amazes me when not just Prince Harry, but a lot of the royal family, they remember you by name. I don't know if they've got a little earpiece in or something when someone's telling them who you are, but every one of them that I've met, they seem to remember from previous events. When you imagine how many thousands of people they meet, you know, every month, you know, it's kind of humbling when they remember you and you remember your name.
And so 2018 was, there's a colour missing from the collection. I want a gold. So that was going back to win. Yeah,
I mean, I only originally set out to do the Invictus Games once, and my goal was to win gold and everything, and it wasn't until I got there that I realised that wasn't going to happen. And so when I came back, even though I only wanted to do it once, I was like, I've got unfinished business. I can't go the rest of my life now having missed out on those 2 gold medals. And so I reapplied again. But this time I had the benefit and the experience of knowing what it was all about. And so I changed the way I approached it. And bizarrely, you know, what my coaches were telling me worked. And I actually listened to them this time instead of just being like, yeah, I'll be all right, I'll just do my thing. I listened to what they told me and I implemented it in my training. And I learned the strategies, I learned how to improve my techniques all across the board. I had the benefit of knowing what it was like to compete, and the environment and the atmosphere and the etiquette and the rules. I learned some of the rules this time around of what I was doing, and it turned out better. You know, it turned out a lot better for me this time.
And what was your final medal haul for 18 was?
So 4 golds, 2 bronzes and 1 silver.
Okay. And this, through these games, it seems that your kind of public profile really has gone kind of stratospheric almost.
See, we don't see any of that because we're in that bubble, and you get people emailing you while you're out there competing, and you know, you see stuff on social media, but you never realise the scale of it really till you get back here and people say like what you've just said to me. You know, because I competed in so many events, I literally would finish one and have no time to enjoy it because my mind would be straight on the next one, and it's like a 2-week blur of life when it just goes woof and it's gone. And then you get back, and then you get invited to do some cool stuff, and you know, you see all this social media content coming up, and you're like, this is pretty cool. You know, I didn't see this when I was out there, but now I'm seeing it. It's quite nice. Yeah.
So what next for you now? What does your next 2, 3, 4 years look like?
Do you know what? I've bust my ass for 10 years straight in my rehab, trying to build a career, to look after my family, and the games and all that kind of stuff. And it can get quite stressful and overwhelming at times. I travel a lot, and I'm not lucky enough to have a driver. I drive myself all over the country and fly everywhere, and you know, it gets tiring. And so next year, my plan is I'm going to set goals. I'm going to sit down next Sunday and actually map it all out. But I'm going to take my foot off the gas a bit and do a lot less, because I want to concentrate on narrowing down on the things that I want to do. Rather than doing so many different things all over the place, I want to narrow down and, you know, concentrate on things like the podcast that I do, on video content, on growing my social media and pushing the messages out there that I have to a wider audience. I'm halfway through my 2nd book now. You know, I'd like to do another documentary if I can. I really enjoyed that process. And I'm going to spend the year working on myself. You know, I want to read a lot more. I want to level up a little bit in CrossFit and Jiu-Jitsu, what I'm doing now. Maybe compete in them, but not on a massive level. You know, just test myself a little bit and learn a bit more. But I really just want to focus on personal development next year. Spend the year, you know, more time in Plymouth, more time with my family, more time doing the things that I love to do, and then leave more space in my diary. Because I think all the stuff I've done over the last 10 years, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that if I leave those spaces open, all the big goals that I have, the kind of far-fetched things that you don't ever think will really happen, hopefully somehow with that space in my diary, they'll all just fall into place, and some really cool stuff will start happening.
What do you, when you do have spare time, what kind of stuff do you do?
I'm a bit of a movie nerd. I love just sitting and watching DVDs. I'm like a giant kid. I'm 35 years old, and I get excited. When the new Avengers film comes out, I'm like, right, that's going in the diary. Nothing happens that day. I'm going to watch the film, and I just love movies. I grew up, just addicted to action movies and stuff. So I just like to relax and watch films and chill.
And in terms of when you do your, when you're out speaking and what you talked about, the kind of the messages. What type of things do you give out to people? What are some of the things that you've learned that is important for you to share?
So a lot of the time with the speaking stuff, the people that want you to speak will give you a area they want you to focus on effectively, whether it be goal setting or overcoming adversity. And generally I say the same thing most of the time. I share my story in whatever format they would like, dependent on time and stuff like that. And then the good thing about it is, and it's quite lucky for me as a speaker, you can pick a lot of different messages out of it. So it could be goal setting, it could be having a positive attitude, it could be not being afraid to ask for help. It might be, did I just say overcome adversity? It might be that, it could be it could be a million different things that you could pick out of it. But what I've found over the years and from the feedback I've got is people will pick their own messages out of it. So if they're sat in the audience and maybe someone's struggling with something that maybe I think is insignificant, like, they can't upgrade to the latest iPhone, but that's destroyed their whole world, and then I stand up there and I tell a story that puts things in perspective for them, and they're like, yeah, okay, maybe it's not that bad. Or maybe they're nervous that they've set a challenge to climb Kilimanjaro and they're like, I can't do this. But then, I tell my story and they're like, actually I can, because I've got 2 legs, 2 arms, and all the resources I need to do it. It's just going to be difficult. So people pick different messages out of it, which is kind of cool about it, and I can kind of tailor it to the audience.
And do you find when you're moving about Plymouth, do members of the public want to come up and talk to you if you're out with the family? Do people kind of want to come up and just talk?
No, that's cool as well. Because this is my city. I love the people that live in it, and constantly when I'm walking around, people are coming up and they're chatting. The Invictus Games had huge coverage, like you said. So then when you come back from that and you're in town and you've come from living here to go into the spa shop to get some milk, people will grab you and have a chat, which is cool. It's I always try and make time as much as I can for people just to have a conversation and chat. Yeah,
and presumably for the kids, that's kind of, it's almost normalised now that that's just their dad, and he's a bit of a hero in that sense. And
in some situations, because of stuff like that, you kind of think, so like Remembrance Day, I won't go up on the Hoe on Remembrance Day because I know it's going to be full of military people. I know I'm going to get grabbed by people and I'll be chatting non-stop, which is great and I love doing it, but my kids are like, Dad, can we go? Dad? And so you're like, right, what can we do where they can attend Remembrance, but not get bored out of their mind because I'm just talking all the time. So we'll go and do something private. So you kind of have to look at things a bit different now and, plan things a bit better. Yeah. But it's really cool.
Yeah. And when you kind of, when you think back in a way, the kind of the experiences you've gone through have kind of, unlocked completely different avenues for you to travel down and kind of platforms to speak on and stuff. How do you weigh up kind of the last 10 years in terms of your, the impact it's had on your life, but also the kind of weighing against that the opportunities that you now have to do other things?
Yeah, it's not been easy. Like I said earlier, every day is different and every day has its own challenges. But I think the good side of it is that it's forced me to level up. It's stopped me getting lazy, because every day is a challenge and every day you have to work hard. But with, the advent of things like social media, that's all that stuff I'm on about. That's me being selfish and talking about what it's done for me. But outside of that, when it comes to contributing and giving back, when you share what you do on a social media platform for thousands of people to see, you can impact their lives in a positive way as well. So it sounds corny and cliche, like some corny Hollywood movie, but you know, from a shit situation, I've been able to use it for good. You know, not just in my life, but for other people's too, which is a really nice feeling. You know, that you can do that.
And have you still got somebody you know, major goals and ambitions, you know, after this kind of period of you know, living life a little bit for you? Have you got things that you really want to do?
There's a load of stuff that I'd like to do, but it involves me finding the right people to build teams with. So I'd love to do stuff with the military, particularly in the space of guys leaving and managing that process to successfully transition into civvy street, because in my opinion, if that was managed better and people were coached and guided, it would cut down on homelessness, you know, veterans in the prison system, guys out of work and all that kind of stuff. I see an area in the market that needs improving. I'd love to do something in Plymouth. I constantly drive around, and I'm gonna have to speak to some friends about how you do this. But I love reading the Plymouth Live website. Everyone's just always moaning and complaining. And I just think, well, instead of moaning and complaining, why don't you do something about it? So I'd love to do something where you could band a group of people together and improve the things that everyone's moaning about. I don't mean like roads and infrastructure and stuff, but you know, grab a paintbrush, grab some gardening gloves and go in the city centre, and the stuff you're moaning about, go and fix it and sort it out and have some more pride in your city. You know, so I'd love to do something like that. And on a selfish note, I've had it in my head for a long time. I'd love to, you know, I've just finished filming that documentary, No Limits, but I'd love to, after watching things like Lone Survivor and those kind of movies, have my story turned into a film. You know, but not the whole, you know, guns blazing, bombs going off type of thing, more of an emotional roller coaster type of movie. You know, it really draws you in and hopefully, you know, inspires people and gives them hope.
Have you ever seen Kajaki?
I haven't, no, I haven't seen that one.
It's tough, it's a really tough watch.
Well, I was contacted by Lionsgate UK, and they said, oh, we've got this film coming out, can you watch it before it's put in the cinema? And it was Jake Gyllenhaal playing the role of the guy who was stood next to the suicide bomber in the Boston bombings, and how he dealt with losing his legs, and you know, and I watched that and I thought, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's not all, you know, there'd be a little bit of the old macho man running around with guns and you know, being a soldier, but 85% of it, that kind of film, you know, like a feel-good kind of thing where you see the whole struggle of the journey and the feel-good part of it.
Kajaki has that bit you talk about process, in that, you know, a device goes off and then everyone fits into this role, but in the, you know, in this case it continues to sort of spiral out of control, and you end up with, you know, just a, you know, mass casualties as it were. But it captures that sense of, okay, everybody stop, do, you know, go into what, you know, the stuff that you need to do in order to keep that person alive. Sort of.
I should watch it because I know the guys. I went through rehab with both the Stewarts and the Andy that was based on. So.
Well, one last question. So you speak to through your work at the RMA. You go in and talk to, is it the Marines who are in training? You go in and talk about the association during week 28 or something.
Yeah, when they get to week 28, it's nothing about me. It's purely about the Royal Marines Association, the Royal Marines charity, what they are, what they do, how they could help them if they ever found themselves in times of need. Just a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll have a bit of a laugh with them and get them signed up, and then, you know, see them again later on.
Yeah. Okay. And are you conscious of being a I suppose an ambassador for the Marines? Is that something that's quite important to you when you go in? And you're obviously you're someone you've given a huge chunk of your life to that organisation, that body. That it's when you're going in and talking in that situation. Are you you're very conscious that the way that you have overcome your injuries is important to the Marines itself, is that it?
Yeah, like I said earlier, through rehab I always said to myself, you've got to maintain the standards, and uphold the reputation. And you know, when you go and you speak to the recruits, I kind of hope that that's what I've done over the years, and they look at me and they think, you know, that's kind of what being a Marine's about. No matter what shit you've got to face, you always remember the standard that you work at and, you know, the level that you maintain no matter what. You know, so being an ambassador to the charity is really important to me, and I hope that I do a good job of it, and do what it is they want me to do, because, you know, even now, 8 years after leaving, you know, it's still a massive part of my life. I think it always will be.
Okay. Well, I think we're done, mate.
Cool.
Thanks, mate.
Hey, no worries, man. Thank you.
Oh, did you turn the microphone off? Did you hit record?